The allure of the obscure corners of the internet had always been irresistible to me. As a blogger specializing in the eerie and bizarre, I thrived on uncovering chilling tales that blended the unreal with the plausible. My readers loved the thrill, and I loved their engagement, comments, shares, and late-night emails that began with, "This gave me chills." One evening, I decided to up my game. My usual content, while popular, was starting to feel repetitive: urban legends, conspiracy theories, creepypasta. I needed something fresh, something truly unsettling. That's when I ventured into the darknet. The darknet was exactly as I'd imagined it: dark. Websites loaded slowly, if they loaded at all, and the pages were plain, functional, devoid of the polish that coated the surface web. Among the jumble of illegal markets, bizarre discussion boards, and cryptic forums, one link caught my attention: The Threshold, Glimpses Beyond the Ordinary. I clicked. The page was stark, with no logo or header, just a list of video links, each labeled with a cryptic title. Apartment 34C, 3:21 a.m. Willow Creek Cabin, Stillness in the Attic. Oak Street, 4th House, An Observer's Delight. The descriptions chilled me. The clips seemed to be filmed in private spaces, homes, abandoned buildings, and sometimes places that looked disturbingly normal, like your neighbor's house or a cozy suburban living room. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. Watching these videos felt like crossing a line. But the line had already blurred when I entered this part of the internet. For the sake of content, I told myself. For the thrill. I clicked on Apartment 34C, 3:21 a.m. The screen flickered, and the video began to play. The footage was grainy, like it was filmed through an old camcorder or a low-quality security camera. A living room came into view, modern and cozy, lit only by the blue glow of a television left on standby. The camera panned slowly, almost deliberately, as if the person filming wanted to capture every detail. A couch with rumpled blankets, a coffee table stacked with magazines, a half-empty wine glass. The camera paused on the hallway leading to a closed door. My heart quickened as it lingered there, silent and still. Then, it advanced slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a bedroom. Someone was lying in bed, their figure barely discernible beneath the blankets. The person filming moved closer. My breath caught in my throat as the camera focused on the sleeper's face, a woman, peaceful, her chest rising and falling rhythmically. The video ended abruptly. I sat frozen, my mind racing. Who filmed this? And how had the occupant not noticed? The sheer violation of privacy made my skin crawl. But curiosity has its own gravity, pulling you toward what you should avoid. I watched another video, then another. Each was similar, a voyeuristic glimpse into someone's most private moments. Some showed empty rooms with faint noises in the background. Others were more sinister, with fleeting shadows or indistinct figures barely visible in the corners of the screen. The last video I watched that night was titled 37 Birchwood Lane, Familiar Shadows. The thumbnail was nondescript, just another dimly lit room. But as the footage began, a chill swept over me. The camera moved through a space I recognized, my space. My apartment. I watched in horrified silence as the video captured every intimate detail: my bookshelf with its neat rows of horror novels, my coffee table with a chipped corner, even my favorite blanket draped over the arm of the couch. The camera paused at my bedroom door. My heart pounded as I realized what was coming next. The door opened with a soft creak, and there I was, asleep in my bed, oblivious. The video ended. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands trembling. Someone had been in my home. I scrambled for my phone and dialed the police, my voice shaky as I explained what I'd found. The officer on the line sounded skeptical. "And you're sure this video was taken in your apartment?" "Yes," I insisted. "It's my apartment. My bed. My blanket." They agreed to send someone over, but by the time the officer arrived, the video was gone. I opened the link, only to be greeted by a blank page. No videos, no cryptic titles, just an error message: 404, threshold not found. The officer looked at me like I was crazy, but I knew what I'd seen. Someone had been in my apartment, and they'd filmed me. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window sent my heart racing. I triple-checked the locks and even moved a heavy chair in front of the door, but it didn't feel like enough. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of shadows, tall, spindly figures that hovered at the edge of my vision. They whispered my name, their voices soft but insistent. When I woke the next morning, I found something strange on my laptop. The browser was open to a blank page, but in the search bar, a single phrase had been typed, "I see you." I stared at the phrase in the browser's search bar, "I see you." My chest tightened. It wasn't there when I'd closed the laptop last night. I was sure of it. I pushed back from the desk, my chair scraping against the floor. My apartment felt suffocatingly small, its corners filled with shadows that seemed darker than usual. I ran through a mental checklist of possibilities. Had I forgotten to close the browser? Maybe it was a glitch, some remnant of my frantic web search last night. But deep down, I knew better. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, Claire. "Hey," she answered groggily, her voice heavy with sleep. "Do you know what time it is?" "It isn't," I blurted, pacing the room. "Something's happening. I need you to come over." "What's going on?" I think someone hacked my laptop. Or broke into my apartment. Or both. I don't know." My voice cracked on the last word, and Claire immediately woke up. "Stay put," she said firmly. "I'll be there in 20. While I waited, I paced the apartment, checking the locks again and peering through the peephole at the empty hallway. Every minute felt like an hour. I avoided opening my laptop, the phrase in the search bar etched into my mind like a scar. When Claire arrived, she brought a wave of relief that hit me like a tidal force. She was the kind of friend who always knew what to do, calm, practical, and fiercely loyal. I explained everything to her, the darknet forum, the videos, the one that showed me in my apartment. Her expression darkened as I spoke, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a growing unease. "Okay," she said finally. "First, we're getting that laptop checked. Then we're calling your building manager to see if anyone's been in here." Claire was always logical, always level-headed. But even as she said the words, I noticed her glance at the corners of the room, her eyes darting to the darkened hallway. "Let's check the laptop," she said, pulling it toward her. I flinched as she opened the lid. The search bar was still there, the phrase unchanged. "I see you." "Creepy," Claire muttered, her fingers flying over the keys. She opened the system settings, ran a diagnostic, and checked the network logs. "Anything?" I asked, hovering nervously behind her. "Not really," she said, frowning. "But there's a program running in the background I've never seen before." She pulled up a small window with a string of random characters as the program's name. Its activity log was filled with timestamps, most of them from the previous night. "I think this might be spyware," Claire said. "Someone's definitely been watching you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do we do?" "We'll take it to someone who knows more," she said, shutting the laptop. "But for now, let's reset your passwords and get your locks changed." The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and paranoia. I barely ate, my stomach tied in knots. By evening, the locksmith had come and gone, replacing my door lock with one Claire insisted was unpickable. "That should hold for now," she said, handing me the new keys. "But you're not staying here alone tonight." We agreed I'd stay at her place until we figured out what was going on. I packed a bag, double-checked every window, and followed Claire out the door, glancing over my shoulder at the apartment that no longer felt like home. That night at Claire's, I fell asleep on her couch, exhaustion outweighing my fear. But the rest didn't last long. At some point, I woke with a start, unsure of what had pulled me from sleep. The living room was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of Claire's fish tank. Then I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The sound was coming from Claire's laptop, which sat closed on the desk across the room. Tap. 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 I stared at it, my heart racing. Slowly, I rose from the couch and crept toward the desk. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate. I reached out with a shaking hand and flipped the lid open. The screen blinked to life, revealing a single message in the same jagged font as before, "I see you." My scream woke Claire. She came rushing into the room, her eyes wide with panic. "What happened?" she demanded, taking in my pale face and the glowing laptop screen. "It's here," I whispered, pointing at the screen. "It followed me." Claire stared at the message, her expression hardening. She grabbed her phone and snapped a picture of the screen before slamming the laptop shut. "We're going to the police," she said firmly. At the station, we explained everything, my discovery of the darknet forum, the video of my apartment, the spyware on my laptop, and now the message on Claire's computer. The officer we spoke to, a tired-looking man with graying hair, listened patiently. But his skepticism was obvious. "You're saying someone hacked into your devices and filmed you in your home?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I insisted. "And now they're sending me messages." The officer sighed. "We'll file a report, but these things are hard to track down. The darknet is, well, it's a black hole. If they've covered their tracks, we may not find them." As we left the station, Claire's determination began to crack. She didn't say much on the ride home, and when we got back to her place, she insisted on keeping all the lights on. That night, the dreams returned. I was back in my apartment, but it wasn't empty. Shadows moved in the corners, their forms indistinct and shifting. One of them stepped closer, its elongated limbs impossibly thin. It stopped at the foot of my bed and leaned over me, its face a blur of static and light. "I know you," it whispered, its voice crackling like a damaged speaker. "And now you know me." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. Claire's couch felt like a prison, the darkness pressing in from all sides. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room, just beyond the glow of the fish tank, a figure stood watching me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The figure in the corner was barely visible, more a smudge against the shadows than a defined shape. But I knew it was there. I could feel its presence, oppressive and heavy, like a storm cloud pressing against my chest. "Claire," I croaked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. Its very stillness was menacing. "Claire," I said again, louder this time, my voice shaking. She stumbled out of her bedroom, bleary-eyed but alert at the sound of panic in my voice. "What's wrong?" she asked, flipping on the light. I blinked as the brightness flooded the room, and when I looked back to the corner, it was empty. "There was someone here," I stammered, pointing at the now vacant space. "I swear, Claire, there was someone standing right there." Claire scanned the room, her eyes narrowing. "There's no one here," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I grabbed her arm, desperate for her to believe me. It was there. It was watching me. I saw it. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Okay. Let's check the apartment. Just to be sure." We searched every corner of her place, from the closets to under the bed. Of course, we found nothing. But I knew what I'd seen. The next morning, Claire insisted we take both laptops to a professional. "Whatever's going on," she said, "we need someone who knows their way around this kind of stuff." We found a small, dingy tech repair shop tucked into the corner of a strip mall. The sign above the door simply read, "Tech Services." Inside, the smell of burnt circuitry and stale coffee hung in the air. The man behind the counter, a wiry guy in his 30s with thick glasses, listened to our story with a mix of amusement and concern. "Darknet stuff, huh?" he said, scratching his chin. "That's some deep rabbit hole you went down. Let me take a look." He plugged my laptop into a diagnostic machine and started typing furiously. The screen filled with lines of code and graphs that meant nothing to me. He muttered after a while, his brow furrowing. What? I asked, my heart pounding. There's definitely something here, he said. A program buried deep in the system. Looks like it's been logging your activity, accessing your camera, pretty sophisticated stuff. Claire shot me a worried glance. Can you get rid of it? She asked. I can try, he said, but this thing's like a parasite. It's embedded in the operating system. Whoever did this knows what they're doing. He worked on the laptop for over an hour, muttering to himself and occasionally shaking his head. Finally, he leaned back with a sigh. I've disabled it, he said, but I can't guarantee it's gone for good. Whoever set this up could easily reinstall it if they've still got access to your network. I nodded, my stomach sinking. One more thing, he added. That program wasn't just watching you. It was sending data somewhere. Files, logs, even video footage. Video? I whispered, my blood running cold. Yeah, he said. And not just from your camera. From other sources too. What does that mean? Claire asked, her voice sharp. He hesitated, then said, it means they weren't just watching through your devices. They were watching you from somewhere else. I couldn't stop thinking about his words as we drove back to Claire's apartment. My mind raced with questions, each more terrifying than the last. Who was behind this? Why were they targeting me? And what did they want? That night, Claire insisted I sleep in her room. Safety in numbers, she said, forcing a nervous smile. But sleep didn't come easily. Every noise set my nerves on edge, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the faint rustle of wind against the windows. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I drifted into a restless sleep, only to wake again to the sound of tapping. This time, it wasn't coming from a laptop. It was coming from the window. I bolted upright, my heart hammering in my chest. The tapping was steady and deliberate, each sound like a nail being driven into my sanity. Claire, I whispered, shaking her awake. She groaned, half asleep. What is it now? Listen, I said, my voice trembling. The tapping continued, louder now, insistent. Claire sat up, her eyes wide. What the hell is that? We both stared at the window, too afraid to move. Then, with agonizing slowness, the tapping stopped. A second later, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I jumped, the sudden noise shattering the silence. Who's texting you at this hour? Claire asked, her voice tight. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. The message had no sender, just a string of random numbers. It read, "Let me in." Claire grabbed the phone out of my hands, her face pale as she read the message. Is this a joke? Tell me this is some twisted joke. I swear it's not, I whispered, my voice barely audible. My whole body trembled, my fingers cold and numb. The window sat across the room, its curtains drawn. I couldn't bring myself to move closer, to pull them back and look. I didn't want to see what might be waiting on the other side. Who would even send this? Claire muttered, pacing the room. Her composure, usually so solid, was starting to crack. How did they get your number? Before I could answer, another buzz made us both jump. Another message appeared, the same string of numbers as before. I'm already inside. My breath hitched. No, they can't be. Claire's expression hardened. We're calling the police. Right now. She dialed, her hands shaking but steady enough to hit the numbers. I sat frozen, every shadow in the room suddenly alive, every creak of the building amplified in my ears. The police arrived quickly, 2 officers, a man and a woman, both young but serious. Claire explained the situation while I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching a blanket around my shoulders like it could shield me. We've checked the apartment, Claire told them. The doors are locked, the windows are locked. No one should be able to get in. The male officer nodded. We'll take a look around anyway. just to be thorough. They searched the apartment, their flashlights cutting through the dim light. I couldn't bring myself to move, watching as they methodically checked every closet, every corner. Finally, they returned, shaking their heads. "Nothing out of the ordinary," the female officer said. "No signs of forced entry, no one hiding." Claire looked at me, her brow furrowed. "You believe us, right? About the messages?" The male officer hesitated, then said, "It's possible someone hacked your phone. These things happen. We'll file a report," but without more to go on, he trailed off, looking almost apologetic. "What about the window?" I blurted out. The officers exchanged a glance before moving to the window. The curtains swayed faintly as they pulled them back. The glass was spotless, unbroken. But something was there, a faint smudge in the condensation, like the outline of a hand. The female officer frowned, leaning in closer. "Could be nothing," she said, though her voice betrayed a sliver of doubt. After they left, Claire and I sat in the living room, the silence between us heavy and oppressive. She made tea, her hand still trembling as she handed me a mug. "Maybe you should delete your blog," she said suddenly. I blinked at her. "What?" "This all started because of that forum, right?" she said, her voice tight. "If you hadn't gone looking for whatever this is." "It's not my fault," I snapped, though guilt gnawed at the edges of my anger. "I know it's not," she said softly. "But maybe it's time to stop digging. Whoever, or whatever, is doing this, they want you to be afraid. Maybe if you stop feeding it, it'll go away." I nodded reluctantly, though deep down, I wasn't sure if it would be that simple. That night, Claire and I slept in the living room, the television playing quietly in the background to drown out the silence. She dozed off quickly, but I stayed awake, every creak of the floorboards setting my nerves on edge. Around 3 a.m., I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. I let sleep take me, though it was a restless, uneasy kind of sleep, full of fragmented dreams and half-formed shadows. I woke to the sound of a door creaking. My eyes snapped open, my heart pounding. The television cast a faint glow across the room, enough to illuminate the outline of the living room door, which was now ajar. It hadn't been before. I nudged Claire, my hand shaking. "Claire! Wake up!" She groaned, rubbing her eyes. "What is it now?" "The door," I whispered, nodding toward it. Her gaze followed mine, and her expression darkened. "I locked that." She grabbed a heavy flashlight from the side table and stood, her movements stiff with fear. I followed her, clutching the edge of her shirt like a child afraid to let go. The hallway was empty, its shadows stretching endlessly in the dim light. We moved cautiously, checking each room. When we reached the bathroom, Claire paused. The door was closed. "I didn't shut this," she whispered. Neither had I. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty, silent, normal. Then I noticed it, the mirror. Words had been scrawled across the glass in dripping red, the letters jagged and uneven. "You can't escape me." We didn't stay in the apartment after that. By the time the sun rose, we were sitting in a crowded diner, sipping bad coffee and trying to make sense of what had happened. Claire called her brother, who lived in the suburbs, and arranged for us to stay with him for a few days. "We'll be safe there," she said. But as we drove out of the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that safety was an illusion. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't bound by walls or locks. As we pulled into her brother's driveway, my phone buzzed again. My hands shook as I picked it up, dread coiling in my stomach. Another message. "You're only making it worse." Claire's brother, Evan, greeted us at the door, his brow furrowed in concern. "Claire told me what's been going on," he said as he ushered us inside. "It's probably just some sick prank. Hackers or something." I nodded, too exhausted to argue, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a prank. This was something else, something that didn't play by the rules of reality. Evan's house was a modest two-story place in a quiet neighborhood. It felt safe, at least, safer than anywhere else I'd been in days. He showed us to the guest room, where Claire and I would be staying. "You're welcome here as long as you need," he said, giving me a kind but worried smile. "Thank you," I murmured, clutching my phone like a lifeline. That evening, we tried to unwind. Evan cooked dinner, Claire tried to crack jokes, and I did my best to smile. But the tension in the room was palpable, a shadow that hung over every conversation. When the sun set, the anxiety returned. I found myself glancing at the windows, expecting to see something, or someone, staring back. "I'll stay up tonight," Evan said, noticing my unease. "Just to keep watch. You two should get some rest." I wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was too much. Claire and I settled into the guest room, the door locked behind us. The dreams came again, darker this time. I was back in my apartment, but it was wrong, distorted, like a funhouse mirror version of itself. The walls seemed to breathe, the shadows alive with movement. The figure was there, waiting. It stood in the corner, its form flickering like static on a broken screen. "I told you," it whispered, its voice crackling. "You can't escape me." I woke with a jolt, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Claire was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful. I envied her ability to rest. I glanced at my phone, which sat on the nightstand. A notification blinked on the screen. Another message. "Look outside." My stomach churned as I stared at the words. Slowly, I stood and moved to the window, my hands trembling. The backyard was dark, lit only by the pale glow of the moon. At first, I didn't see anything. But then, in the far corner of the yard, something shifted. A figure stood there, tall and thin, its face a blur of static. It didn't move, didn't approach, just stood there, watching. I stumbled back from the window, my heart racing. "Claire," I whispered, shaking her awake. "It's here." It followed us. Her eyes snapped open, panic flashing across her face. "What? What do you mean?" I pointed to the window, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "It's in the yard. It's watching us." Claire scrambled to the window, peering out into the darkness. Her face paled. "Oh my God," she whispered. She grabbed her phone and called Evan. "Get up here," she hissed. "Now." Evan burst into the room moments later, his face a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on?" "There's someone in the yard," Claire said, pointing to the window. He looked out, his expression hardening. "Stay here. I'll take care of it." "No, Evan, wait." I called after him, but he was already gone, grabbing a flashlight and stepping into the night. Claire and I watched from the window, our hearts in our throats. Evan swept the beam of light across the yard, his movement steady and confident. But the figure was gone. "There's nothing here," he called back, his voice tinged with frustration. I shook my head, my stomach sinking. It was there. I saw it. Evan sighed, coming back inside and locking the door behind him. "I'm sure you believe that," he said gently. "But there's no one out there. Maybe you just need some rest." Rest. The word felt laughable. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Claire had fallen asleep again, her breathing soft and even, but I couldn't relax. Every sound made me flinch, every shadow seemed alive. At some point, I heard it again, the tapping. This time, it wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from the door. "Claire," I whispered, shaking her. She groaned, barely stirring. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. With shaking hands, I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. On the other side, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice. Soft, distorted, like a recording played in reverse. "I see you. I see you. I see you." I stumbled back, my heart pounding. The doorknob rattled, as if someone, or something, was trying to open it. "Claire." I screamed, shaking her awake. She sat up, alarmed. What's happening? Before I could answer, the door burst open. The figure stood there, its form impossibly tall and thin, its face a swirling vortex of static and shadow. The room seemed to warp around it, the air crackling with electricity. Claire screamed, scrambling back on the bed. The figure stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. "You can't run," it said, its voice a cacophony of whispers and static. "You can't hide." I backed into the corner, my mind racing. The laptop. The forum. The video. Somehow, this thing had crossed over, escaping the digital world to invade mine. "You brought me here," it said, its static face tilting toward me. "Now, you belong to me." The room erupted into chaos as the figure surged forward, its shadow enveloping everything. And then, darkness. I woke up in silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and muffles your thoughts. My head throbbed, and the air around me felt heavy, like I was submerged in water. Slowly, I opened my eyes. I wasn't in the guest room anymore. The space was vast and featureless, stretching endlessly in every direction. The floor beneath me was smooth and cold, like polished stone, but it reflected nothing, not even my own shadow. A faint hum filled the air, mechanical and alive, vibrating deep in my bones. I stood, unsteady, my breath echoing in the emptiness. "Claire?" I called, my voice sounding small and distant. "Evan?" No answer. I turned in a slow circle, panic clawing at my chest. The horizon was blank, the endless expanse broken only by a faint glow in the distance. With no other options, I started walking. As I moved closer, the glow sharpened into lines and angles, screens, hundreds of them, suspended in midair like windows into another world. Each displayed a different scene, their images flickering with static. I approached cautiously, peering at one of the screens. My stomach turned as I recognized the scene. It was the diner where Claire and I had gone after leaving the apartment. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. Another screen showed Claire's brother's house, the guest room where we'd been staying. A third screen showed me, standing in this very space, staring at the screens. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. "What is this?" I whispered. "It is where I live," a voice answered, crackling with static. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The figure was there, its form towering over me. Its face, or the void where its face should have been, swirled with jagged, shifting patterns. "You brought me into your world," it said. "Now, I've brought you into mine." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The figure tilted its head, the motion unnatural and sharp. "Reality is fragile. You shattered the barrier, invited me through. And now, you are part of the network." "I didn't mean to." I screamed, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know what I was doing. The figure moved closer, its shadow stretching impossibly far. "Curiosity has consequences," it said. "You sought the unknown, and the unknown found you." I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The screens surrounded me, their images shifting rapidly now: my apartment, Claire's house, the police station, the tech shop. And then, scenes I didn't recognize: a dimly lit basement, a narrow alley, a child's bedroom. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure extended a hand, long, spindly, and shimmering with static. "I want what you took. A gateway. A path. You are the bridge now." Its hand touched my chest, and a wave of cold swept through me. Images flooded my mind, a chaotic torrent of memories and places I didn't recognize. I saw myself staring into my laptop, the forum link blinking on the screen. I saw the faces of strangers, their lives glimpsed through stolen footage. I saw the figure, always lurking in the background, watching. And then, I saw nothing. When I woke again, I was back in my apartment. The morning sun streamed through the windows, and the world seemed impossibly normal. My laptop sat on the desk, closed and silent. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But then I noticed the message on the screen when I opened the laptop. "Thank you for opening the door." My stomach churned as I slammed it shut. The days that followed were a blur. Claire tried calling, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I stopped blogging, stopped going online altogether. But it didn't matter. The figure was always there. Sometimes I caught glimpses of it in reflections, windows, mirrors, the black screen of my phone when it was off. Other times, I felt its presence in the corners of dark rooms, its static hum just loud enough to make my skin crawl. And then there were the dreams, vivid and relentless, pulling me back to that featureless expanse of screens and shadows. I tried to move, to escape, but it was no use. Wherever I went, it followed. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened the laptop for the first time in weeks and searched for the forum. It wasn't there. The link led to an error page, just like before. But as I stared at the screen, a familiar phrase appeared, typing itself in jagged letters. "I see you." I slammed the laptop shut and threw it across the room, my chest heaving. The lights flickered, and the static hum grew louder. When the lights came back on, the figure was there, standing in the corner. "You can't escape," it said, its voice filling the room. "You're part of the network now." Somewhere, in the depths of the digital world, my face appears on a screen. A new visitor to the threshold clicks on a video, unaware of the door they've just opened. And I see them. Because now, I'm part of the network too.